For decades, Joyce Randolph stayed quiet while Jackie Gleason dominated headlines and rewrote television history. She played Trixie, the loyal friend, in quiet presence in a show built around loud personalities. But behind that calm exterior was a woman who saw everything. At 88, she finally broke her silence, and what she revealed about Gleason's behavior stunned longtime fans. Her story was not just about television legends, but about the quiet cost of working under a man who controlled everything, the truth she held on to for far too long. Randolph's path to the Honeymooners was far from simple. Most viewers never realized she wasn't the original Trixie. The role had first been played by Elaine Stritch in an early sketch version of the show. Stritch's sharper delivery didn't fit what Gleason had in mind. So he looked for someone softer, someone who wouldn't steal the spotlight. Randolph fit the mold, but even then, Gleason wasn't immediately convinced. She had already made a modest name for herself in New York theater and live television. When she was called to audition, it felt like a break, one that came with tension. Gleason approved every major decision and made it clear that talent alone wasn't enough. Randolph admitted she felt like she was on probation during her early appearances. Gleason barely interacted with her, offering no encouragement and only the occasional nod if she did things the way he wanted. She never quite knew where she stood, and that indifference made her second-guess herself constantly. Still, she stayed. Gleason was the kingmaker, and pushing too hard meant risking everything to understand what Randolph endured. You have to understand who Jackie Gleason was on set, not the lovable loudmouth on screen, but the man who ran the show like a one-man empire. He wasn't just the star. He was the uncredited director, the final word on everything. Scripts could be rewritten without warning. Rehearsal schedules changed on a whim, and any actor could find their part suddenly trimmed. Gleason disliked rehearsals and insisted on spontaneity, which often came at the expense of everyone else's preparation. For Randolph, already given fewer lines than the others, this unpredictability was a constant source of anxiety. She often didn't know what her final scenes would be until the cameras were rolling. She wasn't part of the inner circle like Art Carney or even Audrey Meadows. She rehearsed obsessively at home because she couldn't afford a mistake on taping day. On screen, the cast looked like a tight-knit family. But off-screen, it felt more like a court. Gleason was the unpredictable king, and everyone else lived at the mercy of his moods. To fans, the cast's chemistry appeared effortless. Ralph and Ed drove the comedy, Alice grounded the show, and Trixie was the loyal confidant. Viewers assumed the warmth on screen extended behind the scenes, but Randolph later said it was an illusion. She and Gleason were never close. She didn't say it with bitterness, just honesty. There were no off-camera friendships or late-night conversations. He was polite, she said, but distant. Gleason kept a tight circle, and she was never in it. She wasn't invited into creative discussions, rarely acknowledged beyond her role. And learned quickly that pushing for more weather lines or involvement could get an actor quietly removed. She watched it happen to others and adapted. She showed up, did her job, and stayed out of his way. That distance came with a cost. Over time, Randolph became almost a ghost in the show's history, present but rarely mentioned. She never spoke negatively about Gleason until much later, and even then, she chose her words carefully. She didn't accuse or complain, she simply stated the truth. Their relationship was professional, distant, and defined by his dominance. Fans who believed in the on-screen camaraderie were shocked. It was a reminder that television is often a fantasy, and the real dynamics behind the scenes can remain hidden for decades. And what she witnessed when the cameras were off was a version of Jackie Gleason most fans never saw, and many would have trouble believing. Once the spotlight faded, the charming, quick-witted Ralph Cramden vanished, and a far more unpredictable man emerged. Gleason was famously mercurial, shifting moods without warning. One day he might joke with the crew, and the next he could storm off the set over a lighting issue or a missed cue. Joyce remembered how the entire cast and crew walked on eggshells, never sure what kind of day they were stepping into. When things went wrong, his frustration could explode, tearing up cue cards, berating writers for missed laughs, threatening to halt production. These weren't rumors, but memories from those who worked closest to him. Joyce recalled days when he arrived tired or unfocused, leaving everyone scrambling to adjust. Some suspected he'd been drinking the night before. Others knew it for certain, but nobody dared say a word. Honesty could get you blacklisted. Not just from his show, but from opportunities far beyond it. She watched as his unpredictability wore people down. It wasn't a matter of egos or artistic temperament. It was fear. Gleason held real power over casting, over the network, over anyone whose job depended on the show's success. For someone like Joyce, who already felt her role was fragile, speaking out wasn't remotely possible. She learned to read the room, to know when to speak and when to fade into the background. She saw the flattery, the nervous jokes, the quick exits when tension spiked. That culture of fear became part of the show's DNA, and even decades later. She chose her words carefully when asked about those years, but her voice softened when she remembered the long waits, the sudden tantrums, the sharp criticisms that stung more than anyone admitted. She may have stayed quiet then, but the memories stayed sharp. And still, she stayed. Because even after everything, Joyce Randolph saw something in Jackie Gleason that made it hard to walk away. For all the tension and distance and fear he inspired, she never denied his talent. In fact, she was one of the few who could speak about him with real balance. Gleason wasn't just difficult. He was a genius. That made everything more complicated. Watching him work, she said, was like watching a master painter. He could take a flat scene and turn it into something electric with nothing more than a pause, a look, or a twist of phrasing. He understood timing on an almost instinctive level, how long to hold a beat for a laugh, how to use silence, how to give humanity to the absurd. For an audience, it was magic. For a co-star, it could be overwhelming. Joyce often stood in the wings during tapings, watching him flip from the moody, guarded man she knew off camera into the lovable, blustering Ralph Cramden. It was like watching two different people wearing the same skin. And while she never felt included in his inner circle, she understood why others treated him with reverence. His presence filled the room, not just in the script, but in the air. She also saw how fiercely he fought for creative control, negotiating contracts, choosing writers, shaping the tone of the show in ways that were unheard of at the time. Joyce didn't always agree with his methods, but she couldn't deny the results. The Honeymooners was unlike anything else on television, and Gleason made it that way. But there was always a cost. Admiration for his brilliance was always mixed with the anxiety he created. She respected the art even when the artist made her feel invisible. She summed it up once by saying, he was a genius, and he knew it. But that didn't make him kind. That sentence captured the bittersweet truth of her memories. Gleason's brilliance wasn't just in what he created, but in how completely he overshadowed everyone around him. That is why her silence for so many years made more sense than fans realized. People often wondered why Joyce rarely gave interviews or shared behind-the-scenes stories. While her co-stars appeared in reunion specials and documentaries, she stayed in the background. To outsiders, it looked like modesty or indifference. But when she finally opened up, the truth was clearer. It had never felt safe to speak. Joyce understood the unspoken rules of the 1950s television world. Women in supporting roles were expected to smile, follow instructions, and avoid stirring conflict. And when Jackie Gleason was your boss, even mild resistance could end a career. Joyce saw what happened to people who disagreed with him. She had no intention of becoming another cautionary tale. It wasn't confrontation she feared, it was erasure. Later in life, she admitted that her silence had come from a mix of fear and instinct. You didn't speak badly about Jackie, she said. You just didn't. It wasn't written in contracts or spelled out anywhere, but the consequences were understood by everyone. Gleason's power stretched far beyond the set. The network listened to him. The press adored him. Crossing him didn't just get you removed from the Honeymooners. It could end your television career altogether. That fear stayed with Joyce long after the show ended. Even as her co-stars found new roles or retired comfortably, she carried the weight of her silence. It became part of her identity, the quiet Trixie, the woman who never stirred trouble. For decades, she stuck to that role. When interviewers asked about Jackie, she offered polite surface-level answers. She nodded through tributes and smiled through stories that didn't match her experience. She never said what she truly felt, not until much later. What changed? Maybe age. Maybe perspective. Maybe the simple fact that Jackie Gleason had been gone for years and the stakes were no longer what they once were. Whatever the reason, something softened and shifted when Joyce turned 88. For the first time, she allowed herself to speak honestly. She talked about the tension on set, the fear of overstepping, the coldness she experienced from a man the world adored. And in doing so, she reclaimed something she had lost long ago. Her voice, it wasn't bitterness. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity from a woman who had